bus was already a white shape when the wind eased for a breath. Frost sealed the windows from the inside, thick as poured wax. Snow had filled the wheel wells and hardened there, the cast around the axles. He moved between the seats with the careful rhythm of someone counting steps in the dark, shoulders brushing vinyl stiff with cold. Every surface burned. His eyelashes carried weight. He stopped where the aisle narrowed and leaned his forehead against a seat back. The bus creaked once, a low animal sound, as the temperature pressed down again. Outside, the river lay flat and pale, its surface breathing mist into the air. The trees along the bank did not move. Wind found them and slid away. He worked the stove he had set on the floor, a small box with a mouth of iron. He fed it with splinters shaved from a broken bench, slow and patient, keeping the flame small. Fire was a thing to be guarded, not trusted. When it caught, the metal ticked and the bus smelled faintly of resin and old rubber. He watched until the flame steadied, then closed the door and wrapped his hands in cloth. Time moved by the length of his breath. He ate from a tin, the food stiff and pale. He did not rush it. Chewing hurt. When he swallowed, his throat ached. He lifted his eyes and counted the windows. Counting steadied him. Frost patterns crept inward as if learning. The wind returned and struck the side of the bus, hard enough to make the body shudder. Snow whispered along the metal skin. The door at the front had been opened and shut too many times. Ice had claimed the hinge. He braced himself and leaned his weight into it. It resisted, then gave a fraction. A sliver of air cut across his face like glass. He closed it again and pressed rags into the seam. His fingers were slow, stubborn, red. He worked until the ache softened into something dull. Outside, daylight thinned. The world drew itself smaller. He pulled on boots that never quite dried and stepped down into the snow. It reached his calves, dense and silent. He moved around the bus, touching the metal as if checking a body for fever. He cleared the exhaust pipe with a gloved hand, breath fogging the glove white. He shoveled a path with a board, then stopped. The wind lifted, sudden and loud, and erased the path behind him. He waited, head bowed, until it passed. Waiting was work. When he returned inside, the stove had dimmed. He fed it again, sparingly. The flame flickered, then steadied. He set his coat over the back of a seat, careful to keep it from the heat. Steam lifted from the cloth and froze again on the window above. Night came without ceremony. The darkness pressed close, filled with sound. The bus cooled from the corners inward. He lay on the floor near the stove, wrapped in layers that smelled of smoke and old wool. His knees drew up without instruction. He slept in short pieces, waking to tend the fire, waking to the bus creaking, waking to the knowledge of cold. Sometime before morning, the wind changed. It found a seam. Snow sifted down from the ceiling in a fine powder, catching the light of the flame. He sat up and traced the leak with his eyes. The bus answered him with another low groan. He climbed, slow and careful, onto a seat and pressed a folded tarp into the crack, then wedged it with a book swollen from damp. The leak slowed. The powder stopped falling. He climbed down and stood until the dizziness passed. His chest rattled when he breathed. He noticed it and did nothing. The stove went out in the hours before dawn. He woke to a different silence, heavier. His fingers fumbled, stiff. The splinters were smaller now. He coaxed the flame back with breath that burned his lungs. It took longer than before. When it caught, he bowed his head, not in relief, but to save the warmth where it was. Day returned as a weak grey. He opened the door a hand's width and the cold poured in, alive. Snow had climbed higher against the bus. He pushed it back with the board, working until his shoulders shook. He stopped often. The world waited. He saw the fox then, a thin red line at the edge of the riverbank. It stood and watched, tail low. It did not come closer. He closed the door and sat with his back against it, listening to his heart slow. Food was measured by the mouthful. He saved the hardest pieces for later, when chewing would keep him awake. He drank melted snow warmed just enough to not steal heat. The water tasted of metal. By afternoon, the wind rose again, stronger, a long, unbroken push. The bus rocked, a small motion, but enough. He braced the stove with a crate and wedged the crate against the seat leg. The flame bent sideways. He fed it and closed the door tight. When the light thinned again, he lay down and pulled the layers up to his chin. His breath made a cave in the air. He slept and dreamed of movement, of walking without sound. He woke coughing, the sound tearing out of him. He rolled onto his side and waited for it to pass. It left him empty and shaking. The next morning the door would not open. Ice had claimed it fully. He leaned his shoulder into it and felt nothing give. He stepped back and tried again, slower, pushing at the frame with his foot. The bus answered with a crack sharp. He froze. The sound settled. He tried once more carefully and felt the door move a finger's width. He worked at it until the gap was enough to pass a hand through. Cold bit deep. He cleared the exhaust again by feel. The fox came closer that day. It paced the length of the bus, leaving a thin line of prints. He watched it through a circle he scraped clear on the window. When it stopped, they stood facing each other through frost and glass. Then the fox moved on, light as smoke. The stove ate the last of the splinters by evening. He broke another bench, working with the slow anger of someone conserving breath. The wood snapped with a sound too loud. He paused, listening to the wind take it away. That night, the quiet came heavy. The flame wavered. He fed it, and it answered him with a brief flare, then settled lower than before. He lay down closer, turned his back to the door, and felt the cold creep along his spine. His hands were clumsy. He tucked them under his thighs and waited. Sometime in the deep hours, the bus shifted. A weight pressed against one side, then slid. Snow settling. The stove guttered. He sat up, heart slow but strong, and fed it the last of the wood. The flame took, then thinned. He closed his eyes and counted breaths. When he opened them, the flame was a red line. He leaned closer, careful not to touch. He breathed, slow, into the space above it. The line held. His vision narrowed. He rested his forehead on his forearm and stayed there, listening to the bus, to the wind, to the small sound of fire refusing to die. Morning came without colour. The flame was gone. The cold had moved in. He sat and waited for the shaking to stop, then stood. He put on his coat, stiff as rock. He worked the door again. It opened with a sound like tearing cloth. Outside, the wind had laid itself down. The world was still. The river smoked. He cleared the exhaust one last time and stepped back. The bus stood quiet, a white block in a white field. He turned and began to walk along the bank, slow, careful, leaving a single line of prints. After a while, he stopped and looked back once. Then he faced forward again and kept moving.